Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. Tonight I wanted to come and see if we couldn't revisit something which was the settlement agreement with the billboards. And some troubling perceptions of that agreement. I went back and looked at the charter of the city, and obviously within the charter, if you have personal relationships or interests that are conflicting, you need to recuse yourself from being involved in such a venture. And it seems that when this contract was done, or this settlement was done, that one of your council members had a conflict of interest, or at least that's the perception that is there. And that's troubling, because it leads to doubt. It leads to us back to, I thought we had gone past the investigation that you went through, Mr. Mayor, and all of the questions that brought up. And now we're back to more questions and not answers. And that's concerning. And I'd love to hear maybe a public statement at some point in time addressing that. I know you don't have to go back and do that, but there is doubt. There is serious doubt in the minds of the public as to where does the interest lie. Because obviously when we set the city up originally, it was because we felt we were being mistreated by Fulton County. And so now we set up our own city. And that was, I thought, a very noble act. But if we're going to go and start having our own problems regarding being able, this is our city, all of ours, collectively. It's not somebody's little fiefdom. It's our city, and that we should all work together. As this young man just rightfully said, leadership is about that, bringing us together. I may not hear everything I want to hear in these meetings. I know that. I've accepted that. But the reality is we usually do what's right for the greater good. We've had some conflicts before, and I've been on the other side of it. The tower, which I thought was ridiculous, we worked it out. But, to go down these paths sometimes where you feel like things are being done in a stealth manner, it's troubling. And I want to believe that everything's on the up and up. But when you have these seeds of doubt,
thank you, Mr. Corrigan.
So please.
Thank you for your public
comment.
Thank you. Is it Christine Corrigan? It's okay. But did I get the first name right?
Christine.
Okay, good. Maybe it's my eyesight.
I have my own problem. Thank you, Mayor and council members. I'd like to start by saying that Tom and I voted for both Ms. Davenport and for you. We were staunch supporters of you when that little messy action came about questioning ethics and decisions in the city. There are a lot of concerned citizens who've reached out to me, and I think one of the things that is most disturbing, people are afraid. They are afraid to speak. They are afraid to sign their name because of retribution, be it a phone call, an email, an effect in their job. And I think that is not the atmosphere that you and the council members want to create. I've always been really proud to live in Johns Creek. Tom did speak some of my thoughts. It appears that what happened with the settlement is not on the up and up. And it makes us question what other things that were done in the city, whether it be apartment complexes, senior living, what else don't we know? And there's a lot of people out there. I've gotten emails, I've gotten phone calls. What's that old saying? If it doesn't look right, it doesn't feel right, maybe it isn't right. And one of the things that they've questioned is, A settlement that would have benefited Johns Creek would have included height restrictions, not 80 to 90 feet, high, not 48 foot wide. Put into smaller signs. We have our own signage. We live in Medlock Bridge. The people in Medlock Bridge and St. Ives, we've done a lot for the city. We got a high school that we did not want backing up, and that was, of course, our friends at Fulton County. We're going to have a flashing billboard, although GDOT, as you know, denied the application because it's within 500 feet of a freed slave cemetery that is in very much need of restoration. But we all know here that you can just move it 50 feet somewhere else. It's the mistrust. The fact that this personal friend is the billboard owner that signed the settlement. We need answers. Your residents need answers. As you know, you have a highly educated group of residents. They do research, they read. They may not always speak up to you, but they are out there. So I look forward to hopefully some answers. Thank you for your time and your service to the city.
Would anyone else like to make any public comment? Oh, sorry. No, that's the zoning case. Anyone else like to make any public comment at this time? Seeing none? Before we move on to the next item, council may I have a moment of personal privilege, please.
Yes.
You want answers? I'm going to give you answers. And I appreciate folks actually coming up and asking for answers because that's novel compared to what I see lately. However, it's fortuitous that you ask the question on a night that certain people are in the audience because I'm holding in front of me ethics complaints that were filed against myself and Councilmember Davenport, and the ethics complaints are essentially the same with one additional charge being made to Ms. Davenport. They were filed, I don't know, back in 2015, March-ish of 2015, and the essence of them, although you are all welcome to pull them, the essence of them was that I violated the charter by being part of a team that negotiated the settlement, which I'll be more than happy to explain in a moment, and that Councilmember Davenport further violated the charter in addition to being part of the negotiation team because she happens to be personal friends with the wife of one of the billboard company owners. To put it in context, first and foremost, let me read you the independent hearing officer's results of this ethics complaint. It says, the hearing officer finds Mayor Bodker did not violate any provision of the city's charter or code of ethics. Further, the hearing officer finds the complaint and each allegation therein failed to either meet the specificity requirements of Section 2-263-D, or subsection D, and or are unjustified, frivolous, and unfounded. The facts are not sufficient to invoke any further proceedings. In this case, the complaint is hereby dismissed. Councilmember Davenport had the same end to hers, but the beginning said the following. The city's conflict of interest provisions are present to protect the public's interest versus the private pecuniary gain of any elected official. No evidence of any financial interest or gain on the part of Davenport was offered, nor does she hold a position with Action Outdoor Advertising. Her friendship with a principal of the billboard company does not give rise to an ethics violation under these facts. The hearing officer finds that Councilmember Davenport did not violate any provision of the city's charter or ethics code. Further, the hearing officer finds the complaint and each allegation therein failed to meet the specificity requirements of Section 2-263, subsection D, and or unjustified, frivolous, and unfounded. The facts are not sufficient to invoke any further proceedings. In this case, the complaint is hereby dismissed. I do not fault anyone for filing an ethics complaint. That is the proper way to determine, in fact, if there is an ethical violation in our city. That's why we have an ethics ordinance. I would suggest that this question has been asked and answered, and if you don't feel that it's been asked and answered, then I would suggest you pull the ethics complaint. There are numerous statements of various things that fit within the category. Now let me give you the facts, just so we're clear. The Supreme Court of Georgia decided back in, I can't remember the date, but well after the city was formed, on a case that started well before the city was formed, and we in fact held town hall meetings and talked about this, but unfortunately I think a lot of people missed all that because unfortunately until the billboards start going up in the air, people don't really pay attention. Now they're definitely paying attention, especially when the billboard comes to a neighborhood near you. But what we determined was that the Supreme Court of Georgia found that when the billboard companies filed for some 70-plus billboards all throughout unincorporated Fulton at the time, which now includes areas of Johns Creek, Milton, Sandy Springs, and Alpharetta, because Alpharetta annexed parts of Milton and Johns Creek, and Milton, they filed for 70-plus billboards. At the time, this is in the 90s, billboards aren't what they are today. And generally, there could be a single pole with up to 4 facings if they decided to put, 1, 2, and then another one on the back. So really, it's 70 plus times 4 could be the number of facings. So of which 30 some odd were located in the unincorporated area of Johns Creek, and 20 some odd actually ended up in Johns Creek because the other 4 or so ended up in Alpharetta. So what we were facing was, I think it was 27 times up to 4 billboards. Definition of billboard to be determined, but we have found that the Supreme Court and the court system has been pretty liberal as it relates to the interpretation. My personal opinion is that somehow they have misconstrued free speech, which is how they determine this. I consider it for rent speech, since no one gets to say anything on a billboard for free. So they finally found, after all the years, that Fulton County's sign ordinance was unconstitutional. And because it was unconstitutional, they basically said that at the time of the application for these billboards, the sign ordinance didn't exist. And therefore, they're automatically granted their applications to put up these billboards. So now the City Council, fast forward to us, the City of Johns Creek has now been formed. Our first claim was, hey folks, you can't put billboards up. We're a city now. We don't care what happened in Fulton County. And the court said, no, these are vested rights. Because they made their application with Fulton before you became a city, regardless of the fact that they never put them up, once we deemed that it was unconstitutional, they get the right to the billboards. 20 some odd of them. And again, I'm not saying the number because I just don't remember it.
31.
A lot.
31.
Well, 31, but not all 31 were located in Johns Creek. 27. So 27 of them in Johns Creek. That's the risk. So we went through a lot of discussions. I think the only council members that were on council at this time that were there then is Councilmember Zaprowski, Davenport, and myself, because we had Councilmember Stewart and Brad Raffensperger, who are no longer on council. And of course, we were 2 seats shy. We evaluated the risk. We had lots of discussion. We determined that we thought the minimum number that we were ever going to see if we didn't settle was something on the order of 17, even if we fought every single one of the 27. So that's 17. We will have upset the companies in the process, because it started off as companies. We weren't sure whether we'd end up with 2, 3, if they form it in a triangle, or 4 if they form it in a square. So we didn't know how many facings we were going to get, but we knew how many poles we were going to get. We thought somewhere between 17 and 27. So we entered into negotiations. The council assigned myself and Councilmember Davenport. They literally assigned us to play good cop and bad cop. Good cop, bad cop. I did a really good job of playing bad cop. First meeting, I walked in, I pretty much got them about as PO'd as they could be, because I let out about 10 years worth of anger over the billboard issue. Because just like you, I don't really love billboards. And I certainly don't want them in a residential community. I think they belong on places like highways. So we did the best we could. She played the good cop, I played the bad cop. She brought him back to the table when I would piss him off and get him to walk away. But we chipped away at it, and we chipped away at it, and we chipped away at it, and we finally presented to council that the best we thought we could do was 10 billboards, of which 9 would be LED, 1 would be static, that we would try to push them out to the edges of the city, and that we would try to minimize their impact on Johns Creek as much as you can minimize the impact of a billboard. They were already guaranteed certain heights, they were already guaranteed certain sizes, they were guaranteed certain rights. We pretty much were, it was either let them do what they want to do, or try to have some control over the situation in the first place. All of which, by the way, is in an FAQ on our website, which was given at the time that I held all the town hall meetings explaining this prior to us leading up to it. Now, we all can debate whether we got a good deal or a bad deal, but 5 council members out of 5 at the time said, yes, we got a good deal. Doesn't matter what I determined and talked about with these companies or Councilmember Davenport, because the check and balance was the rest of the council. So we're either all bad, all 5 of us at the time, or we're all good. I still believe to this day that had we not settled, we would have a heck of a lot more than 10 billboards located in places that we wouldn't want them, based on if you look at the map, that which is also on our website, of where the 27 locations of the 31 originally were. And so that's just a judgment call that each of you are going to have to make. But as it relates to the question of whether we acted ethically, or whether I violated the charter by being part of this negotiation or pretty much any other negotiation, because they all fall under the same provision, asked and answered. All of this is available on our website. These are not. You have to request these from the clerk, and I'm sure she'd be more than happy to provide them to anyone who'd like to read the ethics complaint and the response. That's why we have independent hearing officers to hear all this, so that there can be no intimidation or otherwise. Speaking of intimidation, there have been a number of postings out in the blog sphere where people accuse without any proof, kind of like the council did back in November of 2013 when they were trying to run me off the council. They made false accusations. Look, folks, everyone has a right to say what they want. I would say there are two exceptions to that. First, if you're going to accuse someone of a crime, don't you think that morally you ought to have the facts? Or if not, maybe before you just put it out there in the blog sphere, call the police department, turn them in, call the FBI, call the GBI, call someone who can independently investigate it before you sully their reputation. Now let me give you the second aspect. My kids, they're 14. They're on Facebook. Some of these were posted on Facebook. What if my kids stumble upon this and there was someone who literally said on Facebook that I went to dinner at Pampas and had money put in my pocket? Or that I was corrupt? That was the exact word. Those are illegalities. My kids might read that. Or their friends might read it and they might confront them. Let's think a little bit in how we phrase these things. If you want to call me a scumbag, you want to disagree with my decisions, you have a First Amendment right to do that. But if you're going to accuse folks of breaking the law, of committing illegalities, have the respect to gather the facts or have some independent third-party law enforcement agency gather the facts first. I can tell you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I have never committed a crime relative to my office here in Johns Creek. I've had speeding, didn't always get caught. That's a crime. But that's not what I'm talking about. I don't take bribes. As it relates to Councilmember Davenport, did anyone watch the RNC conference last week? There was an interesting line said about the candidate Donald Trump. The line was, Donald Trump can't be bought. Donald Trump doesn't need this job. The implication was he'll never be able to be bought off because, what's a billionaire? What difference is that going to make? I don't know how much you know about Councilmember Davenport, but, John and her, they've done pretty well in their lives. Better than probably anyone at this dais and probably, likely, better than most people in this room. I'm not sure that there's a bribe that would have any positive impact on her life. Might have an impact on mine, but I'm not taking it either way. I'm simply asking this. Tom and Christine, thank you. Thank you for coming to the dais, to the podium, and asking for an explanation. That, I think, is the humanistic way that we all can have a conversation, albeit we could have had it one-on-one, but that's okay, I don't care. That's the right way to handle it. Thank you. To the citizen who filed the ethics complaint, no problem. That's the right way to handle it. For those who just throw it out there as if it is true, or read it on some negative blog and then just assume it is true, please be critical in the information. Not everything that is written is actually true. I'm not asking you about whether you agree with me or disagree with me, whether you're voting for me or not voting for me. I'm simply asking that we treat each other as common human beings and that we check with each other and that we talk. And if you're not satisfied, do what you have to do. But for gosh sakes, we ought to have that as dialogue with each other because after all, just like you, I live in Johns Creek. My kids go to school here, just like your kids do. I go and worship here, just like you probably do here in Johns Creek. I shop at the grocery stores you shop in. I drive on the roads you drive on. I participate in parks and rec programs in the parks, just like your family does. I have the same vested interest. That's the only reason I'm sitting up here, and I'm pretty sure it's the only reason my fellow council members are sitting up here. Thank you, council, for the indulgence, and I hope in some small way, Mr. and Mrs. Corrigan, I've had an opportunity to address some of the questions that you had. But if you have additional ones, more than happy to sit down anytime you'd like.
Can I make a suggestion?
Councilmember Andres.
In light of what you just said, and we're going into a retreat, it might make sense that we have a conversation about the appearance of independence and engage in that conversation. Because I think it's a worthy discussion, because there's a lot of distrust of people in politics today because of relationships And it makes sense, like you said, to have a conversation that we have one at the retreat and talk about that.
I don't know that we'll be able to fit it into this particular agenda, but we'll give it a shot. But I'm happy to have that conversation. I hope everyone else on the dais is as well. But let's all remember this, that at the end we all have to independently govern ourselves, and we take the risk based on how we govern ourselves. Of course, there are bright lines within the ethics ordinance that says what you can and can't do. The rest is all based on perception, and we have to decide whether we think we're going to have a problem based on that or not. The other thing that I'll tell you that we struggle with that you all may not realize, there's a nuance to Johns Creek's charter that doesn't actually exist in many governments in Georgia or elsewhere. We are actually required to vote on every matter. I don't know if you realize this, but in many governments it's routine that if I don't like it or I'm uncomfortable with it or I just don't want to be on the record, I just get up and walk. In Johns Creek, our charter says you must vote with two exceptions. If you have a pecuniary interest, meaning I have something to gain in the decision, or you have an overt conflict of interest. Other than that, we are required to vote. So that's the rub in appearance of impropriety or not. The other thing we have to have is a functioning government. Folks, as your chief elected officer, the council often assigns myself and the city manager to do lots of negotiating. It's part and parcel to how the job gets done. Because sometimes you have to play off the elected official, and sometimes you have to play off the appointed official. Some would, no matter what we're going to do, say that there's some impropriety in that. But there's also checks and balances, because no matter what I do, I can't unilaterally do anything except veto. Everything else has to be approved by the council. But I think you're right. We should have a discussion.
Well, and something else that's noted in those ethics complaints is that the complaints were filed because of a true read of the document. So the individual that filed it said they truly read it, and the statement in there basically said that that's not realistic. And the problem that you run into is that the document says X, the people believe X, yet we can manage to a different standard. And I think that's part of the conversation.
But
does it mean what it says, or does it mean what we want to interpret?
Madam Council Member, at the end of the day, we can believe it. That doesn't make it so. We have a hearing officer who's independent. They have no relationship with the city. They have no relationship with us. And ultimately, they look at it legalistically. They're a qualified lawyer, in this case, a constitutional lawyer, and they looked at it. So you may not like their answer, but at the end of the day, that's why we have a hearing officer to independently assess these things.
But when you set your standard to what the bottom floor is, which is the law, and we hold ourselves to higher standards, you have a different conversation. I mean, the law doesn't say adultery is bad, but we believe, many believe, that it is. So you're having a different conversation about the higher moral standards, which comes into the comments that were made about the appearance of independence. So anyway, I just say that I think it's a good dialogue to have.
And I agree with you. But I'll also say this at the end, and then I'll yield the floor. We want good people to be involved in public service. Disparaging their names without facts, doing what the former council did to me in November of that year, is why good people don't get involved in politics. You can have your opinion of which partisan party you want to be in, but at the end of the day, if we want good people to be on the ticket for either of those or any of those partisan parties, we're not going to do it if we treat people like poo-poo.
We should look at how we submit mailers for elections then.
Shall I move on?
Yes.
Councilmember Zabrowski.
I'd like to say something on this because I was on council at this time, and I can't address the ethics complaints. I've never read them, never seen them. Mike, you had maybe some inconsistencies in your thing. I believe it was 31. This is my recollection of it. I can tell you right now, we knew about Corey's relationships. We voted for that. We allowed her to do that. So I was full aware of that. In my heart, I know that the settlement we got was better than what was out there. It was my understanding. I think it was a 6-0 or 7-0 vote because Councilmember Gray was on there. He came late. This was handed to us one of my first meetings. Hey, welcome to Johns Creek. You got a billboards. I'm like, what? And I think that was handed to us, and it was a shock, and we spent a lot of hours. I spent probably, with our new attorneys too, you can back me up and if you recall this differently, Mr. Gray at the time probably was not in the same mindset of all of us and maybe on some of the mindset that some people believed. So we went into this and Bob came to the same conclusion as me, and we spent a lot of time with our attorneys. It was my recollection that we had 31 billboards that could be put in our city with up to 4 faces. And when it came down to it, our two council members, or Councilmember Davenport and Mayor, had negotiated down to 10. They moved them from the inside of the city, which they would have been mostly up and down Medlock Bridge and State Bridge, up to 31, up to 4 faces, height requirements, all that. We didn't have a lot of say. We had not a lot of negotiation because they could have stopped and done that. There was questions whether they would be LED when that thing was done. We didn't know if they'd be LED or not. That was debatable. I think the ruling was probably a lot of them would be LED. But the bottom line came down to it was going to be at least 17 billboards, mostly through the middle of our city. They negotiated most of them to the outside of our city, which I get some flack from Roswell residents and some Forsyth because the ones on Holcomb Bridge went up first, but that's what was negotiated. It was a better settlement for us, 2 faces, height. We got to put some brick requirements on them. So I'm going to stand up because I think in fairness, I would tell you, I wouldn't lie to you, but we knew about it. I don't think there was any impropriety that I knew about. I wasn't in the meetings. I can't say that, but I can tell you from knowing these people, I can assure you Councilmember Davenport doesn't need a gain from that. You probably don't know this, and I'm going to mention this, but you don't even take a salary for the city. She gives up her salary. She doesn't take that. And I just don't like it when people's families get involved, man. It's just not fair. I don't think there's any impropriety in this. Then it hurts when that happens to us, So I can tell you, if there was any impropriety, I don't know about it. I would tell you if there was. I know about the ethics complaints. I've never read them, don't care to. If I see something, I disagree with Mike more than anyone on this council, and we fight on this council. So I would tell you if something was going on. I've said this along, I don't agree with him, but he's never done anything untoward in any way that I've ever seen. And I can assure you, Corey would not do that. That's just not there. I wasn't in the meetings, but it was granted by our parts. We let them have. Council members Stewart and Raffensperger knew about it. We all agreed to it. In this case, there's nothing there that I know about. Probably could have done a better job divulging that at the time. But yeah, these were things in executive session, so we could not talk about that. But as far as this goes, I think we're barking up the wrong tree. Everyone can do what they want. I think it comes down, I just had a conversation with Mike about this the other day. I think that people don't trust politicians for a good reason, and we need to do a better job of showing you, being transparent, which I think this council is hopefully trying to do. In this case, with the billboards, in my heart, I know it's not true, and I wouldn't say that if I didn't believe that in my heart. And I give you my word on that. That's all I can do.
So well said, Councilman Saprowski.
That's all I can say.
Very well said. And just to set the record, both Councilman Gray and I were elected and kind of walked into the middle of the negotiations, and like everybody else in the city, we went, heck no, we're not getting any billboards. And quickly we learned about the Supreme Court settlement and started reading the documents, and and we're in the briefings in executive session about the progress of negotiations. And all I can say is I think we got the best deal the city could have gotten. I think Councilmember Davenport and the mayor did an excellent job representing everybody's interest in the city, not just the council's interest. And I think we should be proud of the settlement. It's certainly not a settlement that any of us want, but given the difficult position the court put us in, it's the settlement that we've got, and I think it's best for the long-term interests of the city.
It's really a shame that we've developed the attitude we have about elected officials, but I'm sure it's been earned by many. The thing that really bothers me is no one will ever know what really goes on behind the scenes with any of us, and that's some of the things that get questioned. But let me tell you what goes on behind the scenes for me. I eat, live, and breathe this city. It's probably the number one complaint people have of me because they think I'm overly involved. I would think that's actually a good thing, but let me tell you how much I eat, live, and breathe this. The years that we were leading up to that billboard settlement, because of course I knew it was coming because the Supreme Court decision happened like 3 years prior to us finally. We staved it off for 3 years, but that was as long as we could go. I lost sleep over it. I have to be careful because I don't want to disparage the billboard companies, but personal opinion, I don't love billboards. I don't even like them. I get it. And obviously it works for someone or they wouldn't exist. But as someone who lives in this community, it was killing me that I knew that whether it would be 1, 27, 31, 10, 1 was too many. We already had 1, by the way. So, anyways, again, we've spent a lot of time on this. For those of you who want to write it down, 678 451-3313, or watch the video. That's his cell phone. Call it if you'd like. mike.bodker@johnscreekga.gov. Be happy to have a conversation. I got a busy schedule, but I promise you, if you need to talk, we'll find a time and make it work. Won't be about intimidating. It'll be about, I'll share whatever facts I can. Maybe you can share your perspective, and hopefully we'll figure out together how to make this the best darn place we can. Because guess what? It's our city. All of ours. Thank you for your time tonight. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Thank you, Mayor.